One day, my mother-in-law casually dropped a bombshell on me while I was completely stunned. "We'll be living together soon," she said. "We just remodeled your place into a duplex for convenience." "Oh, Emma, since the property's in your name, could you please cover the $80,000 remodeling bill?" She and my husband laughed, seeming quite pleased with themselves. Watching this, I felt a surge of determination. I was ready to confront them with the truth even my husband didn't know, along with proof to back it up. "My name is Emma Davis. I'm 26, and I live in a quiet area surrounded by nature, working in an office and drawing as a hobby. Recently, I started sharing my illustrations on social media, and reading the comments every day has become something I enjoy. My husband, who is 3 years older, and I live happily in a charming old farmhouse we bought right after we got married. But since the wedding, we've had a monthly visitor who always leaves me stressed. Emma, I'm here. Open up quickly." I rushed to the front door, hearing loud, persistent knocking. "Oh, mother-in-law, I'll open it right away," I said, wondering why she never used the doorbell right next to her. She was already complaining. "So many bugs here, it's so annoying. Is George still at work? Poor thing, working even on a Saturday. I brought some of his favorite food." Standing at the door, looking tired and holding a large bag, she went on and on, forcing a smile. I listened. This monthly visitor was my husband's mother. Since he's an only child, she insists on taking care of him. Even though we're married now, she even tells me how to do housework, like last time when she rearranged everything in my fridge, and I had to search for ingredients just to make breakfast the next morning. Before we got married, my husband always said, "If my parents need care, we'll live together. Please understand that." I had accepted that one day we might need to move in with his parents, even though I love this old farmhouse, but living with my mother-in-law every day, just the thought of it filled me with dread. 2 years into our marriage, in the farmhouse, I heard from my husband that my father-in-law had slept on the stairs and broken his leg. My husband said, "They'll need our help now. Let's live together, just like we talked about before we got married." Yes, I'm worried too, so I think that's a good idea. But can I still continue with my drawing hobby? I was genuinely concerned for my father-in-law's health, so I agreed without hesitation to the idea of moving in together. Still, I worried that taking care of my in-laws and managing the household would take away my time for drawing. My husband, either unaware or ignoring my concern, simply said, "I want you to prioritize the house," and then left for his office. Sitting alone in my room, I felt like I was half giving up on my own needs because of his selfishness. Looking back at my illustrations one by one, I tried to sort out my feelings and accept this change. Just as I made up my mind to live with my in-laws, something unexpected happened. While I was at work, I suddenly felt numbness in my hands and feet, followed by intense dizziness. I collapsed. Thanks to a quick-thinking coworker who called an ambulance, I made it to the hospital in time, and thankfully, I wasn't in critical danger. The diagnosis, a stroke at a young age. I regretted ignoring my high blood pressure, which had been flagged in previous health checks but never addressed. The next few months involved a whirlwind of medical exams, surgery, and rehabilitation, and I was hospitalized for 2 months. During this time, I realized just how little concern my husband had shown for me. After being diagnosed, I picked up my phone with trembling hands and called my husband immediately. All I heard on the phone was my husband's disappointing response, "I see. So living together will be postponed." He seemed more concerned about delaying his plans to live with his parents than about my health. I was too stunned to respond, but since my father-in-law was still in the hospital with a broken leg, there was no immediate caregiving needed, so I could focus on my own treatment. Plus, we didn't have kids, so I didn't have to worry about that either. My mother-in-law's words about wanting grandchildren echoed in my mind, but I brushed it off, picking up my sketchbook. I'd been so busy preparing to move in with my in-laws and going through medical exams that I hadn't had time for my art. I decided to treat this hospitalization as my last bit of free time and fully enjoy my drawing. After this, I was determined to give my all to my husband and in-laws, handling all the housework and whatever else they needed. The 2 months in the hospital passed quickly. On my discharge day, my husband casually offered to pick me up, but I wanted some time alone and declined, feeling a little guilty. On the bus ride home, I watched the familiar landscape pass by. The sunlight on the green leaves looked stunning, and I felt a pang of sadness, thinking it might be my last time seeing this beautiful place, since my in-laws' house was closer to the city center. When I got off at my usual stop and walked toward our home, I suddenly found where our charming old farmhouse had once been. There was now a completely unfamiliar house. Feeling confused, I checked the surroundings and retraced my steps, but there was no mistake. This was the right place. Unsure of what to do, I timidly rang the doorbell. My husband's familiar voice answered, "Yes." Still in shock, I replied, "It's Michelle." The door creaked open, and there he was, in casual clothes, looking relaxed. "Welcome home," he said. "You're back early. I had the day off. I could have picked you up." I interrupted him, filled with disbelief. "George, what happened to our house? Why does it look so different?" He brushed off my questions with a casual, "What's the matter?" Just as I heard laughter coming from inside, heart pounding, I pushed past him into the unfamiliar living room, and there, on the couch, was my mother-in-law, clutching her stomach and laughing at the TV. It was clear that my home had changed in ways I hadn't expected. As I entered the living room, my mother-in-law greeted me warmly. "Oh, Michelle, welcome back. Hospital stays are long, but don't worry, took care of the house while you were gone." Confused, I asked her what she meant by taking care of the house. She smiled without hesitation. "Well, since we're all going to live together, I remodeled it into a duplex. It'll be more comfortable this way." Her words, "remodeled it into a duplex," echoed in my mind. My mother-in-law had always been intrusive, but I never thought she'd go so far as to remodel our house without permission. Besides, weren't we supposed to move into their house near the city? She'd always complained about the bugs here and the walk from the station. Then, turning off the TV, she whispered with a grin, "Oh, and the remodeling wasn't cheap, since the house title is under your name. Michelle, could you handle the payment?" She chuckled, unfazed. It came to about $80,000. The words hit me like a punch. My legs felt weak, and I was speechless as she sat there laughing. Just then, my husband walked in, with a faint hope he might be on my side. I explained what his mother had done and the unexpected bill. His response, cold and dismissive, "That sounds about right. Just take care of it, will you?" It became clear then, this was the kind of man he was. When I'd collapsed from a stroke, he'd be more worried about moving in with his parents than about my health. He always put his mother's opinions first. At that moment, my frustration and anger boiled over. I took a deep breath and said firmly, "George, I'm done. I want a divorce." "And Cecilia," I turned to my mother-in-law, "you need to cover those renovation costs yourself." I turned to leave, but they didn't let me go easily. My husband sneered, "Fine, go ahead. But remember, this house is in your name, Michelle. You're responsible for that bill." I didn't respond. I just walked out. Done with both of them? I couldn't believe how selfishly my husband and mother-in-law were acting. I let out a sigh, knowing they were probably grinning, thinking they'd won. But I stood tall and said, "George, you keep saying the house is in my name. Did you forget? I transferred ownership to you." At first, they just laughed, thinking I was lying to avoid pain. I reminded them how, when we got married, George insisted I transfer the house to his name for appearance sake. Since I didn't care about the title, I did it right away. Suddenly, their laughter stopped, and panic set in. "I don't remember saying that," George stammered. "There's no proof. Anyway." Expecting this response, I walked over to an old drawer and pulled out the property document. "Here it is," I said, holding up the paper that clearly listed George as the owner. His face turned pale. "That's fraud," he yelled, realizing he now had to pay the $80,000 renovation cost. I was disgusted by his reaction, and knew a reasonable conversation was impossible. From now on, let's communicate through lawyers, I said firmly. Cecilia, looks like your son has some things to figure out. Take good care of him. I left, ignoring my husband's calls, and decided to handle everything through legal channels. Given the strain in our relationship and my ongoing issues with his mother, the divorce went through without trouble. My husband had shouted about fraud, but my lawyer assured me that since we agreed to the transfer when we got married, it was entirely legal. With that assurance, I felt a huge weight lift off me. Reflecting on it, I realized they intended to trap me with this renovation bill right after my recovery, but I had walked away free of their schemes, finally able to leave the man their debts behind. In the end, since the house was in my husband's name, he had to take on the full payment himself, which ultimately put him in a tough spot. I also managed to secure alimony in the divorce. My husband, facing a debt he couldn't repay, may have ended up borrowing money from some risky sources. During this time, I got a message from my father-in-law, Bob, who was in the hospital with a broken leg. He apologized for the behavior of his wife and son, though he hadn't been directly involved. Bob had ignored his wife's and my husband's cold treatment of me for the 2 years we were married. After a brief response to Bob, I decided it was time to cut all ties with that family and start fresh. Since then, my health has slowly improved, and I've been able to return to work. When I was married, I used to draw illustrations, always worrying about my husband's reaction. Now, I can draw as much as I want, whenever I want. What started as a hobby is now a job I get commissions through a social media platform where I post my art. Today, I'm traveling to see an old farmhouse in a peaceful, rural town. My dream is to use my alimony and savings to buy this farmhouse and turn it into an art studio. As I look out the bus window at the scenery, I remember the day I left the hospital. Day everything changed. The sunlight streaming through the trees makes the leaves glow, reflecting my excitement and hope for this new chapter in my life.